All right, we'd like to wish everybody good evening and welcome to the third of 4 Radar refresh sessions that we'll be conducting here in support of the January-February 2015 testing and rating period. As I mentioned, this is the third of 4 sessions. We'll be doing another one in about an hour and then making the recordings of all these sessions available for future viewing at any time on demand. My name is Rich Overholt. I'm the Implementation Services Manager with McCann Associates. As most of you know, McCann is a technical partner for CCHI on the administration and scoring associated with the core CHI and the CHI exams. Now, folks, in our session tonight, you can expect this to last somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes, as usual. The training will start with this brief overview and greeting, which will run somewhere around 5 minutes, led by me. Then we're going to get into the meat of the training session, the Radar refresh itself, which will run about 20 minutes. I'll also be taking that through, along with an assist from Natalia, a couple selected slides. And then we're going to allow some time at the end of the session for general question and answer. For any questions that should come up from any of you, and both Natalia and I will be fielding those questions. So let's dive right into our refresh. All interpretation and site translation problems are scored. In the CHI exam, we utilize anchored rating scales with specific quality of response associated with each score point assigned by each rater. Criterion ratings are randomly inserted during the rating process, and this is done to provide us a means of being able to have a standard measure of quality control of the rating process overall and for each of you as individuals. All problems are scored by 2 raters. If the 2 raters that are scoring one individual problem have their scores differ by more than 1 point, then the problem is automatically funneled to a 3rd rater called a chief, who makes the final overriding score determination for the problem. Now we're going to get into a little bit about the validity of the items and the test. In 2010 or so, a job analysis was conducted led by CCHI, which identified the critical knowledge, skills, and activities required for successful medical interpreters. The resultant deliverable was the development of a test blueprint, which details which specific skills are critical for successful interpreting performance, how those skills should be measured, and with how many test items for each. Each of the items on the test is explicitly linked to a KSA. This is a knowledge, a skill, or an activity, which is described in the job analysis report we just mentioned. The test content developers completed the initial linkage, and CCHI-led subject matter experts verified the content developers' linkages for accuracy. All performance of items is continuously monitored by CCHI with technical assistance from McCann and its psychometricians. It is critical, folks, to successful and accurate rating and scoring that item raters keep in mind at all times during the rating process what the target audience is for the CHI assessment. Always keep in mind that the purpose of this exam is to distinguish minimum proficiency as a healthcare interpreter from lower levels, given the target audience, and not to identify masterful interpreters. In this definition, the target audience represents a person who is able to perform the functions of an entry-level healthcare interpreter competently and independently in a healthcare setting, with the knowledge, skill, and ability required to relay messages accurately from a source language to a target language, and in a culturally competent manner and in accordance with established ethical standards. Keep in mind also that entry level in this case refers to the level required to be able to begin performing unsupervised healthcare interpreting competently. The CHI assessment utilizes anchored rating scales. A hallmark of anchored scales is that each individual score point on the rubric has associated with it a very specific definition. And the task for you as raters is to evaluate the item you're rating in the context of the anchored rating scales, and then to assign a score based upon your common interpretation of the definition provided on the scale itself for each performance level. there are very clear and distinct and well-established advantages to using anchored rating scales like this. They tend to be very easy and intuitive to use and understand. They provide very specific feedback to candidates at each score performance level, and they minimize the potential for rater subjectivity. And the sort of scoring being conducted for CHI is referred to as performance scoring, as opposed to knowledge scoring, which allows the testing of candidates on complex content requiring detailed responses. In the case of the CHI, the items require examinees to generate a response which is scored by all of you as raters. There are known issues with performance scoring. Such content can be difficult to score. The process overall has an inherently greater risk of subjectivity. And actually, that's what necessitates the needs for rater refresh trainings like this every quarter to ensure we all understand the nuances of scoring and we're all on the same page. Performance scoring is far more costly due to the human factor and the involvement of having the training and the involvement of all the raters. And it does require that raters are constantly participating in ongoing training as well as ongoing performance monitoring. There are known risks to high-quality rating, and CHI, with its partnership with McCann, takes great efforts to mitigate those risks. Good rating requires sound inter-rater reliability. What this means is that raters must agree with their ratings of the same test taker's response to an item, and to the extent that raters agree, we have good inter-rater reliability. The use of anchored rating scales in the rater refresh meetings each cycle are meant to maintain that good rater agreement. And in addition to this, McCann regularly tracks and reports on rater performance each cycle and each year, making sure that raters perform consistently. In fact, we're right now just assembling the aggregated rater analyses for 2014 in the 4 testing windows. Now, there are known threats to quality rating, and all of you as raters should keep these issues in mind as you conduct your scoring. The first situation is referred to as the halo effect. And this is when positive or negative performance on one part of a test by a test taker can influence subsequent ratings. So, for example, a test taker does really well on one part of the test and is subsequently rated and viewed positively on other parts of the test, regardless of performance. Another situation is central tendency. This is the failure to differentiate across candidates and essentially means that raters are assigning near equal ratings to all problems, regardless of actual test taker performance. Contrast is another situation. This is where test taker performance is judged not against the anchored scale, but rather against the performance of other candidates during that testing window. And the fourth situation is drift. This is a situation that arises over time, where a rater essentially applies different standards or interpretations of the anchored scales over time. All things to avoid. Now, a couple things to consider as you go through rating, and starting here in January and February for 2015 rating. Are you rating within the guidelines and scoring definitions? And do candidates' errors represent the shift in meaning? And to help make sure that you're keeping these items in mind and that you do have a precise understanding of the scoring definitions and what represents a shift, we're going to now review the nuances of all the scoring performance levels and the various domains as part of the rubric. The rubric is unchanged. It's been the same rubric that we've had in place since the launch of the test back in 2012. It's the same 4 scoring domains and the same score points and performance level descriptors at each one of those points. Our first scoring domain is register. And in this context, register is a variety of language used for a particular purpose or in a particular social setting. Examples can be prescribed grammar, formal and informal tone or forms of address, technical terminology, and colloquial language. A score point of 0 in the register domain means that changes in register can render the meaning inaccurate. A A score point of 1 means the changes in the register shift the meaning of the message. A score point of 2 means the changes in the register don't affect meaning. And a score point of 3 means the register is maintained. Now, our second domain is lexical content. Again, in this context, lexical content refers to units of information, or the facts. These can be individual words, or groups of words, or phrases that communicate a single concept. Here, errors can include omissions or additions, or the inaccurate translation of a unit of information. For lexical content, score point of 0 means that errors can render the meaning inaccurate. Score point of 1 means that errors in the lexical content can shift meaning of the message. Score point of 2 means that errors in lexical content do not shift meaning. And finally, score point of 3 means lexical content is maintained. Our third domain is grammar. Again, in this context, grammar includes a set of rules governing how sentences, phrases, and words are put together in a given language. Some examples of errors in grammar can include those associated with verb tense, the number, the gender, or word order or syntax. The score point of 0 in the grammar domain means that errors render the meaning inaccurate. The score point of 1 means that grammar errors can shift the meaning of the message. Score point of 2 means that grammar errors do not affect the meaning, and a score point of 3 means that grammar is maintained. Our final domain is the quality of speech. In this case, quality of speech focuses on physical characteristics of the speech produced. This includes false starts, repetition, poor pronunciation, volume control, pace, and intonation. The 0 in the quality of speech domain indicates that changes render the meaning inaccurate. Score point of 1 means that changes in the quality of speech shift the meaning of the message. Score point of 2 means that changes in quality of speech don't affect meaning. And finally, score point of 3 means the quality of speech is maintained. Now, some general notes and things to consider as you apply your scores. Each score point has a specific meaning. It is common across all the domains, and all ratings should be done with that in mind. 0 always means changes or errors rendering the results inaccurate. 1 is always changes or errors shifting the meaning. 2 is always changes or errors not shifting the meaning. And 3 means no changes, no errors. And also please keep in mind that scoring is not actually counting the errors, but rather assessing the impact of the errors on the meaning of the response. Now, as you proceed through your rating, if you encounter where a candidate self-corrects, please score that last utterance, whether it is right or wrong. Events of this nature should be considered as a false start when you're rating for the quality of speech domain. If you find it helpful to do so, you can score the lexical content domain first. And we also ask you to treat omissions as lexical content errors. If the test taker fails to maintain register of the speaker provider or of the patient, it is considered an error and should be scored accordingly. Any regionalism used in a response is accepted as correct if the response is free from meaning and grammar errors. Now, there may be situations where data is missing, and it is important for you as raters to distinguish between the sources of the error, because the rating task will shift accordingly. Essentially, we have issues that are technical in nature and issues that can be related to the candidate performance. Now, data are missing due to technical reasons. Do not penalize candidates. If the responses for the rest of the problem are sufficient, you can score it. This does not concern key issues relating to scales, such as medical terms, terms of art, or colloquialisms. And in that case, you'll probably want to make a note, such as audio cutoff. If you're a chief, pay attention to the scales, not the fact that a message is cut off. You need to mark all utterances that are absent for technical reasons as inaudible when appropriate. If you cannot score it, mark it as cannot be rated. Now, on the other hand, if data is missing due to candidate reasons, candidates may be penalized. 50% or more is missing and a response can't be rated, mark the box can't be rated, and provide a comment in the notes box. This documentation is really important. Folks, I wanted to make extra mention of this. This is something that Natalia's been stressing. We tried to make extra mentions of it in the last couple of sessions that were done last night. It is absolutely crucial that you as raters put in a little extra effort in this rating period regarding providing comments. As it mentions here, if an item is more than 50% missing and it can't be rated, you mark the box can't be rated, and you provide a comment in the notes. That comment is crucial in terms of providing feedback to people, especially when they have a failing score. It's sort of disheartening, I think, for a candidate when he or she gets a failing score and there's very little actual tangible feedback that's provided from all of you as raters besides maybe a 0 or a 1 as a score point. Those comments are very tangible and very important feedback. So again, I'm going to make extra mention of it now. We're actually going to mention it a couple more times as we go through, but they're very important, and we ask that you redouble your effort this rating period for providing those comments, please. Now, a couple of overall reminders on the way that we ask you to work in this training refresh. Each rater must work individually. There's no pairing up. We've already discussed our rating system and the need for raters to agree. And we wanted to mention generally that in terms of where we see the greatest variability in terms of ratings, let's be very clear that overall, you as raters, you do an excellent job. You demonstrate strong, consistent agreement on all the rating activities and domains. If there's one area where maybe there's a little bit more variability, it would probably be in the lexical content domain. Grammar, register, quality of speech, they're maybe a little bit more consistent. You know, again, lexical content has more variation. That could just be to the nature of the material there. McCann and CCHI jointly review rater performance at the end of each testing window. And as we do so, we're considering 3 distinct items of information. Number 1, how well each of you as raters agree with each other and your peers. Number 2, how often did each of you as individual raters require a judge compared to the group? And how variable were your ratings as a rater? We should mention that if you have not heard directly from CCHI concerning your rating performance, it means your rating is within the range of acceptable standards. And congratulations, it means you're doing a great job. And I would imagine that very few of you have heard from CCHI directly because, again, you as a group demonstrate very strong agreement and very strong performance. So kudos for that performance. We mentioned comments. Let's mention them again. Your comments on the responses are very important. If you assign a score of 0 or 1, you must provide a comment. Now, I know there's nothing in the interface that prevents you from assigning a 0 or a 1 and then going to the next item. But again, we're asking you folks, please, when you go through this rating period, a little extra effort, especially at the score point of 0 or 1. We really are asking you to provide a comment, and please use as much specificity as possible. I know it represents more time and it's a little more effort, but it's your feedback that's going to tangibly affect the way that candidates who fail can sort of redouble their efforts for the next time they retest. These comments are crucial. Sheets, you must provide comments for all of your responses across the board at any score point. Please provide a comment. One second, please. Let me go ahead and just pause this. Sorry about that, folks. Working out of a hotel room here. Again, please provide a comment if a candidate has poor skills of keeping the meaning and finding equivalents. Please provide a comment if a candidate has poor command of grammar. And also please provide a comment if a candidate mostly does not maintain register or replaces colloquial expressions with neutral ones or vice versa. Now, objectivity in scoring is critical, and this is because each of the languages CCHI certifies is spoken in multiple locations, and this results in many variants in the same language. CCHI recruits raters from a broad spectrum of countries. Objectivity is also ensured by having multiple raters rate each candidate, as many as 14. As you well know, there are 7 vignettes in each test. As there are 2 raters for each vignette, you have the potential for 14 raters to actually complete rating for a language. Again, if 2 raters disagree by 1 or more points, a 3rd rater is assigned to actually provide the overriding score for that individual response. And collectively, all these measures ensure that ratings for CHI exams are free from bias and as representative as possible of true level of candidate performance. Now, along those same lines, we also ask folks that you try to allocate your time as much as possible evenly throughout the rating window. And what we mean by that is we prefer that you don't just log in to the scoring tool to do your rating today and bang out 30, 40, 50 items and then not go near the scoring tool again for the rest of the rating period. It is much more effective in terms of objectivity for you to log in maybe every other day and do some smaller number of ratings instead of doing a large number. You know, maybe you just limit it to 5 or 7 or something like that. Certainly, it's a little more effort on your part, but it does help ensure that there's a much greater attention paid to that objectivity. We also ask that you don't rate more than 2 to 3 responses for any one candidate. Now, I should mention that 2 to 3 is a good rule of thumb for Spanish and Mandarin raters. Since there's a smaller pool for Arabic, you probably want to treat it as 4 to 5. And we'll ask that you follow our guidelines regarding the initial workload at the beginning of the testing cycle, which I'll get into in a minute. And I really apologize for this phone. There's about 4 phones in this hotel room, and I can't seem to pull the plug on all of them. Now, you are permitted to actually start rating today. As soon as we are done our training session, feel free to log into the scoring tool and get to work. If you're a Spanish rater, you can rate up to 150 vignettes, and then we ask that you stop and await instructions either from Natalia or myself on doing more. Same thing applies for Arabic and Mandarin raters. Feel free to start rating today. Just make sure you stop at 20 and await further instructions about being able to rate more. Now, when we ask you to stop and not do too many ratings for one candidate, here's kind of a practical tool for looking in the scoring tool, or a practical tip, rather. When you're looking at the scoring tool and you're seeing information about each item, the user or session ID, let me go back, tends to repeat for the same person. So in this case, you're seeing 4 rows. The user ID is common across all 4 rows, and the response ID is different. This means we've got 1 person with 4 responses. So again, if you're a Spanish rater, you'd probably want to stop at 2 or 3. If you're or a Mandarin rater as well, if you're an Arabic rater, you might want to go a little higher to 4 or 5. Again, we're just trying to maintain that objectivity as much as possible. Here we have a slide dealing with ADA and accommodations. We'll turn things over to Natalia for just a moment on this one.
Thank you, Rich. As you've already heard in the previous refresher sessions, we do have a special ADA policy for candidates who are blind. They are provided with a human reader, and if you get a candidate who has this accommodation, you may hear them say in English, stop or next. Please ignore those commands because they are referred to the human reader. Also, those candidates may be cut off during the site translation response because they are doing it in a different way, more as a prepared simultaneous versus the site translation. However, I wanted to let you know that during this testing window, we don't have any candidates like that, so we don't anticipate that you'll come across anything like that. Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Natalia. All right. Now, when and if you have any questions, please keep in mind the following. CCHI is ultimately the owner of all the policies associated with the CHI exam. So anything relating to hours or being out of country or having to stop rating and things of that nature, please address all those types of questions directly to Natalia or to Malika at the addresses that we're going to provide on a later slide in the meeting. Please note that McCann should only be contacted for customer support issues in using the scoring tool or questions of those natures. Speaking of that, let's talk about how you can contact us and get help. McCann's customer support team does offer expanded hours during the normal business week. During the testing window, you'll see the hours reflected here, Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 11 Eastern, Friday and Saturday, 7:30 to 6. We do not offer tech support on Sundays, so we ask that you try to refrain from rating. We do offer after-hours support, which we'll show you in just a moment. If you need to reach us by phone, our toll-free is listed 866-933-0508. And you can reach our help desk at email at measuredsuccess@mccantesting.com. Now, if you try to get a hold of us off hours, your best bet is to use email. Myself and Beth Tobin are still your primary two contacts, as we have been for the last number of testing windows. Our addresses are listed, R. Overholt Advantage, Beth Tobin, or E. Tobin Advantage. And we do ask that you copy Natalia and Malika, whose addresses are listed as well on all messages. It's not necessary to copy all of the other raters. You can just send the messages directly to Beth and I with a copy to Natalia and Malika. Now again, we mentioned this previously, but we wanted to mention it again. When can you start rating? You may start rating now. The light is green. As soon as you hang up on this call with us, you can feel free to start rating. I think as of today, there's been 33 total tests administered, so there's lots of vignettes to rate. Testing for this current window runs till Wednesday, February 11th, 2015. We're going to give rating just about 2 weeks beyond that. We ask that you conclude your regular rating by the 23rd of February. If you're a chief, we also ask that you conclude your chiefing by the 28th. And if all goes according to this mandated schedule, we should be able to release scores to the candidates in the first week of March. And hopefully accredit a lot of new raters, or a lot of new interpreters, rather. So this is going to bring us to the end of the prepared materials. Again, folks, I appreciate you bearing with me and my overbearing telephone here in the background. But at this point, we'd like to just open up to any general questions that you might have for the group, either Natalia or myself.
Okay, well, let me take this moment to check who is online, so that I can, keep the correct record. So I see Anna, Lauren, Maggie, and Ying Hong.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So if there's anybody who I didn't mention, you just speak up now so that I can make a record. But I think that's all for today. So some of you participate in our online rater module creation right now, and I wanted just to make a comment for you specifically that what Rich was talking about, as he does every refresher training, the rubric that is used for scoring, that's the rubric we want you to use when you create those special responses in the instructions you received. So we ask you to translate some sentence at the level of 0 or 1 or 3. That's what we meant, that you use this rubric and create that special translation. When the project is complete and we assemble it, we will ask each rater to take it so that we can get your feedback before we employ it to use for other new raters. So that's all I have on my end. I wish all of us a very good and happy rating season. Usually winter testing window is not it does not have as many exams as the other 3 testing windows, but we have about 100 exams already, so I still think there's plenty for each of you to rate. So thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
And
Have
thank
a night too.